Crypto Strikers was just kind of dormant for a while. And then one day you're like, I got a DM from Gary V. Then everything changed, right? It just came all the way back, millions of dollars of sales. Out of nowhere, you had like Gary promoting, talking about Crypto Strikers being the OG sports card collectible. You had Logan Paul collecting, Steve Aoki. Gary was like buying everything up. Like, how did that all happen? Today's guest is Gianni Settino, founder of Hot Street Fantasy, Crypto OG, godfather of NFTs, and most notably, my old roommate.
Hey,
welcome to Money Talks, man.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I want to start with, we're going to jump right into the NFT stuff. So in 2017, you created the first ever sports NFT project. You were way ahead of the curve with Crypto Strikers. So what led you to like start doing NFTs way before the whole NFT bubble?
Yeah, I mean, it might be helpful context to kind of like walk through like my journey, what led me up to that point. Basically, studied computer science in school. So basically was starting to be a software engineer. Graduated from McGill, so we're both from Montreal. And then was building apps for like third parties. Basically, it was like in an app studio, just shipping like products for like Yellow Pages, like big corporations that didn't have an internal development team. So I was just cranking those out and basically got to the point where I was like, I want to be part of like a team that's building something like an internal product that we can like take from the ground up and also like develop and grow and not just hand it off to the client once we're done with it. So that took me to New York City to a company called Draft, which was a fantasy sports company. Jeremy Levine, the founder, very well. So I worked there basically 2015 to 2017. And Draft ended up getting acquired by a big player like in the sports gaming space, Paddy Power Betfair, which is like a big British gambling company. And like that just kind of left me. I left basically Draft post acquisition, had made a bit of money from the exit, and just had like a lot of free time. So dove deep into crypto. Was mostly just like messing around at first, trading, like watching the charts all day, kind of like degenerate stuff. But I was basically learning a lot about the projects that were coming out at the time, which a lot of them were like basically scams and Ponzi schemes and stuff. But one of them that caught my eye was something called CryptoKitties, which was basically the first NFT project ever. So it was like these cool little cats that you collect, you can breed them together, and then you can like sell them on a marketplace based on like the rarity of their traits. They can have like some crazy, unicorn is like one of one stuff, like the stuff we see with NFTs today. CryptoKitties kind of pioneered a lot of that stuff. So was doing that, but then, the trading of like NFTs, of like flipping these CryptoKitties just got old after a while. I'm like, I want to build something using this like new tech that I'd kind of opened my eyes to with CryptoKitties. And I tried to marry like one of my interests, which is like sports and sports tech, and this new paradigm of like digital ownership and collectibles. And it kind of like worked out well. The World Cup was that year. The FIFA World Cup was 2018. So I'm like, how about putting like sports cards on the blockchains? Like I grew up collecting sports cards. There was this idea of like, buying, selling, trading, marketplace. Like a lot of the ideas that CryptoKitties developed, I can piggyback off of, but just apply like a sports card kind of layer to it. So just started building that in early 2018. And then in the lead up to the World Cup, kind of like, started growing a community. And then we launched on the first day of the World Cup. So that's kind of the journey, is like CryptoKitties inspired, something in me to go build Crypto Strikers, which ended up being like somewhat of a decent success for NFTs at the time, which were much smaller than they are today.
Yeah. So yeah, for people to realize like how early you were, it's like the whole like meme of like being early was like, oh, you found out about NFTs like in early 2021, you're early. You were like 2017. So literally like 4 years before like anyone was talking about this shit.
Yeah. I mean, like I like discovered NFTs, forgot all about them, and then like rediscovered them in 2021. So like, that's been around for a bit.
So you obviously have a knack for finding things early. Do you think in that case you were too early? Do you think you can be too early to things?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you like zoom out a little, what I built is basically Top Shot or So Rare, which are now like multi-billion-dollar corporations, right? I mean, they're not doing great right now. I think
right now
kind of struggling a little, but like, if you take the concept of like digital sports collectibles that are tradable and that are collectible and that are, there's a marketplace for them. Like, I mean, they did a lot more than I did. They got the licenses, there's like stuff I didn't do, but like the concept was there. It was just a little too early and didn't have the eyeballs. Cause like we did talk to some leagues, we did talk to even some VCs at the time of like, hey, we have crypto strikers, we have a few thousand users for the World Cup. And they're like, yeah, this is like the stupidest thing we've ever seen. So kind of like took the wind out of my sails, ended up just having like a more of an acqui-hire exit with crypto strikers, which, brought me to LA. It was like pretty good, all things considered, but like it wasn't the huge success and the huge exit, had it been maybe 2-3 years later that like a So Rare or like a Top Shot was. But yeah, I think there is such a thing as being too early and maybe like second mouse gets the cheese type situation. But
it's crazy how much timing can play into these things. Like it's like, obviously if you're too late, you miss trends, and you were like just like a little too early and you didn't have that massive exit or something. And it's like, there was just that like 2020 to 2022, right? Like that year and a half period where like, what was Dapper's valuation? 7 billion or something.
yeah,
They raised money
they
and like,
raised the highest round was like 7.6 billion.
like that's so insane.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it's just how people can time things, and they were doing crypto stuff for a while too. It's not just like they heard about NFTs,
they
jumped
did
on,
CryptoKitties.
right?
Yeah,
So
if you zoom out, like they kind of became full circle because they did CryptoKitties, which inspired Crypto Strikers, which then they did Top Shot. So they're OGs.
Yeah,
but the timing is very, very important.
So all things considered with them, it's actually kind of deserved because they were around and they did that first thing and pushed the envelope there, and that didn't really work out long term. But then we'll see what happens. But like then they did Top Shot and all those
NFL stuff,
and they got all these licenses. But yeah, it's crazy that just the timing, getting the licenses, convincing people that this is a big thing, becoming a big thing.
Well, it's like I think that the just if you consider like headwinds versus tailwinds, like we had headwinds. Like I was like talking to VCs and they almost like laughed me off the call. Like I'm sure in 2021, 2022, Dapper had just like these like massive tailwinds of COVID, people being stuck at home, people like wanting to degen gamble on like, anything they can trade. So like I'm sure VCs are like, coming to them and throwing money at them. So it's just like it's the environment that you're in just kind of facilitates and makes stuff a lot easier.
Yeah.
And they benefited from that hugely.
So I remember, with Crypto Strikers, so it was 2017, 2018, it was kind of dead, dormant for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got back in NFTs. You got me into NFTs. We are like two of the probably first 300 users on NBA Top Shot, summer 2020. And then I remember one day, so Crypto Strikers was just kind of dormant for a while. And then one day you're like, I got a DM from Gary V, and then everything changed, right? It just came all the way back, millions of dollars of sales out of nowhere. You had like Gary promoting, talking about Crypto Strikers being the OG sports card collectible. You had Logan Paul collecting, Steve Aoki, Gary was like buying everything up. Like, how did that all happen?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it seems like it was such a long time ago, but it was crazy time. What ended up happening is that Crypto Strikers was sitting dormant. We had actually gotten, because the NFT format was so old, like the original cards were so old from 2017, OpenSea no longer supported them. It's like they weren't even showing up on OpenSea. So people who bought like cards, like, our friend Ben, who had like hundreds and hundreds of Crypto Strikers cards, like they wouldn't show up in his OpenSea wallet. And people were pinging me on like Discord and like, various like Twitter DMs and stuff and saying, hey, like NFTs are hot again now. I have all these Crypto Strikers from back then. They're seeing CryptoPunks and all these like OG projects have these skyrocketing prices. They're like, hey, it'd be really cool if we can get Crypto Strikers back on OpenSea. So like my first mission was to just get the cards working on OpenSea. So I wrote like basically like an upgrade or like a wrapper to the Crypto Strikers cards to get them to show up on OpenSea. So that was like step one. And then like they were trading a bit, kind of a little bit of attention. And I'm actually not sure how Gary found out about them. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember one day like seeing like a spike in sales and like someone had come and swept, hundreds of them. And then like people in our Discord like, oh my God, I think that's Gary. It's like one of his wallets. And then I got a DM from him. He invited me to the podcast. I did the podcast. He started pumping it as like the original OG NFT project or original sports card project, talking about, this is like Neymar's rookie card of soccer. So kind of like, he definitely, he drove a lot of traffic. He has got a big audience, but he found it, I think, somewhat organically. I think he was digging for historical projects. Just so happened I'd pushed that wrapper up like a couple weeks before. It's like right place, right time.
Crazy.
And the rest is history. But like most NFT projects, we had that big spike and then kind of a bit of a calm down.
What was the because I remember when it was all happening, you were like, we're doing more volume than Top Shot right now.
Yeah.
It was like summer 2021. What was like what was the trading volume in that like month or whatever? Do you
I
remember?
don't remember. I think we've done 2K ETH cumulative.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So that's like what ETH is like around 2K. So that's 4 million.
$4 million
volume. And
it's
I
crazy.
think a lot of it was like in that like first or second month. It's kind of
Crazy.
like a huge spike and then a bit of a drawdown.
Because when it first launched 2017, I remember you saying you sold like $25,000 or something, right? In a couple months.
In that ballpark. So we were selling packs. You'd buy basically a pack,
which was a lot back then for like something that you created out of thin air.
Right.
But then it's like fast forward, you're doing $4 million in sales.
But also we had royalties set to 0 on the new kind of relaunched the wrapped strikers basically. It's like we didn't really see anything off that. I saw it fit that like I'm not working on the project. I'm not driving it forward. People have had these cards for years. Kind of want to reward the holders and not be like, scraping some money off there. So 0 fees. So like, the 4 million was just like between people, and OpenSea, I guess, takes a small cut. But
yeah. So you've been around NFTs now probably longer than almost anybody. What's your view on like, so right now NFT volume is way down. We had that insane kind of bubble in 2021. It's way down now. What's your view on which parts of NFTs and crypto are going to stay around and like continue to evolve or like add value?
Yeah, it's a good question. So what parts of crypto broadly or NFTs specifically?
NFTs, crypto, like where do you kind of see it all going? Like, it's easy, I think, in a bull run for everybody to be like, yeah, this is the future of collectibles and this technology is going to fix everything. And then like, as soon as the hype dies down now, everyone's kind of like, oh, we don't need that in our life. And it's literally, most people aren't using it at all. So like, yeah, I'm trying to figure out which parts of NFTs will actually be used.
Yeah, so I think like humans have an inherent need to collect stuff. There's like, I see, I guess the shoe wall's not here, but the shoe wall's there. Like, people have an inherent need to collect and like flex and kind of like showcase their interests and, kind of like send a signal to the world like, hey, these are the things that I'm into. And that's like just as old as time, right? Like humans from like probably prehistoric times had a way to signal like that they're, of a certain status or of a certain, kind of a certain like passion. So I think like even if NFT prices are down, there's still some pieces that I have. Like I just like looking at, like I like knowing that I own them. So that's like a basic human biological need. Like I don't think that's going away. And I think as we increasingly spend more and more of our lives online, it's like that just makes sense. You have this like provable ownership of an asset online. And like it's, this Counter-Strike gun recently sold for like a couple $100,000, and that's controlled in Steam's or Valve's walled garden. But like eventually having these things be something that you own completely in case the game shuts down, I think that makes a ton of sense to me. As far as like crypto as like a way to like spend money online, I don't think we're there yet. The fees are still too high. I'm looking for stuff that's like, more scalable blockchains that has like kind of reduced fees and then you can actually be buying stuff on the internet with crypto. But I think the NFT stuff is here to stay. I think a lot of the profile picture stuff, the Bored Apes, the punks, were kind of like had this massive run up. Prices got way out of hand. These are the next Rolexes, 500K for a Bored Ape or whatever. It's like, I think we need to take a step back and like look at ourselves in the mirror and be like, all right, what the fuck are we thinking at that point? But there is something to be said for like being able to own a digital asset and kind of showcase it online. And I think that like we're slowly going to build back up from first principles on like that digital ownership. But we got ahead of our skis a tiny bit in like 2021, 2022.
I think it's interesting for things that are sustainable, like gaming, like you talked about a gun selling, like something that like that word utility got like way over fucking used for a couple of years, but like something that you can actually use in a game that people want to play. And then it's like, if people still want to play a game because it's fun, then it's sustainable, right? It's like that's just going to sustain because people want to play the game. And then within the game, if you have things that you can spend money on that add value to you in the game or maybe even make you money, like that's kind of where I see
for sure.
Which like people in crypto say gaming is a huge thing. It hasn't really happened yet, but
I was thinking about this like a lot this week. There needs to be like a breakthrough crypto game that's like really fun to play just because it's like a fun game in and of itself. And it has the crypto kind of natively because like right now a lot of the games are it's like the games are kind of shit. but it's like, oh, there's crypto on it. It's like you should play it because you can make money. It's like that's like the wrong paradigm. The game has to be fun in and of itself, and just so happen to have like a crypto layer on top of it.
Yeah.
Because it's not the incumbents that are going to like add crypto to their games, because there's no incentive for them to do it, because they capture everything in their like little ecosystem. They capture all the trading volume. They can like revoke, the gun skin from Counter-Strike. They can like control that. It's like they have no incentive to open that up to like an open ledger, like a blockchain, right? So it's gonna have to come with like one like breakthrough crypto game that everyone wants to play because it's like amazing, and then it just so happens to be built on crypto primitives. I think that'll be super interesting. We haven't seen that yet. So
Yeah, it hasn't broke through. I think because everything Web3 was so hot, so it was kind of backwards. It was like everyone was trying to like prove that their thing was Web3 and like attach Web3 to every project instead of the opposite, where it's like using it to like power something that people like.
For sure. I mean, the money was just like so abundant that it's like if you had a company that was like a failing like dating app or something, and you like go like pivot to Web3, now you raise at like crazy high valuation. So I see why people did it, but yeah, the incentives are kind of like people put the cart before the horse, and we're doing it strictly for financial reasons and for fundraising reasons, but not like because it made sense to their product.
Yeah. How many Web3 studios, Web3 like fashion brands, Web3 podcasts, like everything was just.
Is this a Web3 podcast?
This is this isn't even a web podcast. This is like a.
This is like yeah,
primitive. Okay, so I think like me, we have in common, we don't like doing traditional things with money. You take some really risky bets. But one thing we've talked about a lot, so you take big risky bets with your money, but you're really into like asymmetric bets. That's kind of what how you describe like what's a good bet, and not only betting as in sports betting, but like investing, whether it be angel investing, crypto.
right.
So a lot of people don't understand how like an unlikely bet can still be a good bet. Can you just like explain your thought process on that? Like,
Yeah, so I see this every day. I deal, with my company with Hot Streak. We're a daily fantasy sports app, and people are basically making predictions against us as the house, and there's odds on either side, and there's like this concept of expected value, right? So let's just like zoom out, forget like sports, forget anything, but like imagine you had a game at some kind of carnival that like you had a 1 in 10 chance of winning, right? So like 9 out of 10 times you're losing the game. Right? Like that's like people would look at that on a surface level and be like, oh, that's a game I'm going to lose 9 out of 10 times. That sucks. Like the odds are stacked against me. But like, what if the one time you win out of 10, you get 100 extra money? Right? So like if you were to play the game, say the game costs $1 to play, you play the game 10 times, you lose 9 times, you lose $9. But the one time you win $100. So you're actually up like $91 on the game. Right? Like that's just like the basic math is, provided that the payout when you do win is sufficiently high, even if you don't win very often, you actually come out ahead. Given, well, you have the assumption there being that you can play the game over and over again and have like the bankroll to like take enough shots to make that math work out. But people in general, I think, are like, they see something that has like a 1% chance of hitting, and they're like, oh yeah, like that's 99 to 1 against me. Like I'm going to lose that, but they're not thinking about like what happens when you're right. How large is the payout when you're right? So that's kind of like the concept of like these asymmetric bets is like your downside is capped, but your upside is potentially unbounded. And like the kind of the expected value is greater than you would assume, even though it's like a 1% chance of hitting or smaller.
So people are just too emotional, right?
It's not emotional. I think people in general want to be right. They prefer to be right than to like make money, like or like they want to be like correct and feel good with their decision more frequently. Like if you're playing a game where you're winning 1 out of 100, like it kind of sucks when you lose 99 straight times or something, right? And that's going to happen. But if you're able to kind of like put up with the swings and the downfalls and like take those L's, knowing that like your upside is still positive EV, given the payouts you do get when you hit, like then you're in a good spot. And I think there's like a lot of these games that people just don't. I say games. It's like anything in life is like a game or like a bet to me. There's like just kind of probabilities on either side and like a payoff. Like if
could be a startup, could be stocks, crypto, like
anything that is like a decision is like probabilistic in my mind and has odds on either side. So basically, I say game, but gamble, whatever the word is. But people in general want to be right rather than kind of like maximizing their long-term income. So they'll do the thing like feel safe and kind of like, they'll hit more times than not, but actually leaving a lot of money on the table because, maybe they're not getting paid off enough for the times they are right.
So, okay, I remember one of your great trades. It was like February 2020, and you came over to me and you're like, I think this COVID thing is going to be actually a lot worse than people think. And this is going to affect the whole US economy. And you shorted the S&P 500.
Yeah.
You want to describe that trade?
So I bought, look, I was spending way too much time on Twitter, and there's like a lot of like these doomers on Twitter that were like, oh my God, like COVID is like ravaging China and Italy. And like, it seemed like the US media is not covering it. I think that like S&P was all-time high. Stock market's pumping.
Might have been January 2020.
I think it was like, January, February. And it was kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, we haven't seen a pandemic in the US or on that global scale for like, I don't know how many, like probably 100 plus years. But if this is something that's like as serious as people claim that it is, and if it's going to affect the US the way it affects like China, which is like in full lockdown at that point, Italy, which like the hospitals are overflowing, like it's going to have a serious effect on the economy. So it's like, maybe it's a 1% chance of hitting, but it's like, potentially like maybe it's a 10% chance of hitting, but it's like 100x my money if it does, right?
So that's one of those trades.
So it's one of those trades. Basically, the my downside is capped. If I'm wrong, I lose $1, but if I'm right, I get $100. And as long as that math, the probability on either side works out, then you take that swing. So ended up buying like $1,000 worth of puts, which was like, a small portion of my portfolio, but it was worth that shot given kind of the asymmetry of the downside to the upside. And like within like 5 days, I think COVID made its way to the US, started spreading, like S&P tanked like 30%. So that $1,000 in puts became worth $100,000.
It's crazy.
Unfortunately, options are very, very volatile. And I kind of like got caught up a bit in the doomerism of like Twitter. And like, I'm like, it's going to get worse. Like, like the whole economy is going to shit. Like we're going to shut everything down. Like everyone's going bankrupt. And I kind of just let it ride. And basically, there was some government measures to kind of like pump money into the economy. So they started printing more dollars, and that kind of like reversed the losses in the stock market. And I basically round tripped it from like 1,000 to like 100K back down to essentially zero. But the original thesis was correct. It's like this asymmetric upside. If I'm right, I 100x my money. If I lose kind of 1x my money. Just had to close out that trade a little bit better. So.
It's a good story. You've been trading crypto also since 2016?
Yeah, I would say 2016, 2017.
So you've seen some high highs, some low lows, some big wins, big losses. What are some like notable crypto trades that you can remember, like your best ones and your worst ones?
I mean, I think if you like when I look back at all the crypto stuff I've done, the best was buying Ethereum at like $80. I was, basically had just gotten that draft exit. I was still in New York at the time. There was like a crypto conference happening in New York, in Brooklyn, and it was all like Ethereum based. And I saw just like a lot of like energy around Ethereum, a lot of developers like excited to build. And it just seemed like something was happening there. And it's kind of, again, one of those things where it's like, it still seems this is like buzzing in the circles that I'm in like the tech circles and like the very nerdy niche circles, but hasn't spread to the mainstream yet. So like there's some like upside. It's not like everyone and your mom is talking about Bored Apes and NFTs when it's at the, when it's at the peak. This is like still pretty early. If I'm wrong, like, whatever, it's still so niche, I probably can't go down that much. And if I'm right, there's like huge upside. So I ended up buying a bunch of ETH at $80. It's like at 2,000 now. So, it's gone up to 5,000 at one point. It's gone bouncing between some crazy numbers. But I think that was like just a clear like expression of a thesis where it's like, I think people are building cool stuff. It's still very underground. If I'm wrong, my downside's capped. If I'm right, my upside's like pretty large. And I still think, again, not financial advice, but I still think ETH has like room to run, and there's still a lot of like interest on it. I don't think it's reached its full potential. So I'm still like basically holding some of that ETH I bought at $80.
Yeah, that's awesome. Any really bad ones you can remember? Losing a ton in one trade? Or
I mean, I did some like stupid stuff with like leverage trading. I was just like, that's like pure gambling. I think I like ran up like a $100 balance to like 25K back down to zero. And that was just like, I knew like in that moment that like I'm just like that's just gambling. You know when you're at your computer and like you're getting adrenaline rushes, like that's not like smart investing. That's not
Yeah.
like good financial decisions. It's just like you're chasing a high.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty like sensitive to like when I feel that way. I know like I'm not doing the right thing. I'll close out a trade. But that was that was like just leverage 100x, like hit the green button, watch the screen flash. Like that's just yeah. But everyone has to go through that. You have to kind of know how that feels and experience that to be like, all right, I don't want to do that again. Like
Yeah.
this is not my niche. This is not where I'm good. So
Yeah. So, okay, again, not financial advice, but back to like smart trading and what you think is the best way to trade. Because it's tough to know when these things are going crazy, right? That's kind of when you hear about it. And a lot of times that's really the top. So, how do you decide? And I think you're really good at this because you get in things really early and take, again, these shots that might not usually work out, but when they do, huge payoff. And you know when to get out too. Like you're not greedy on a lot of these things where like a lot of times you're getting out of trades when other people are getting in. And like that's an interesting thing. How do you look at that?
yeah,
Because
well,
I think a lot of people trade crypto and want to like trade stuff, but they're literally buying the top and losing all their money.
yeah, you have to think in any trade, like who's my exit liquidity? Like who can I actually sell to?
Right.
It is
People
a bit of a
forget
game.
that.
People forget that. Like it's not like the stock market or like shares of Apple or something. There's like a very very liquid market where you can go and like dump like a probably $100 million worth of Apple in a day. Like wouldn't move the market that much, right? Crypto, like there's the Bitcoins, the Ethereums, the kind of the large cap coins that trade a bunch. Like you're not likely to move the market. But if you're in some niche NFT project, and for some reason that's like the hot project of the day, and people are buying it that day, like you have liquidity then and there. So it's like if you're holding like a large stash, it's like that's the point you want to sell because like there's actually people buying and people are like very fickle and have very short attention spans and they're likely going to move on to something else the next day and like then your liquidity dries up and like you're like undercutting floors to try to sell it for like pennies on the dollar, right? So I'm pretty sensitive to when there's exit liquidity. I'm like I know I have this amount of like unrealized gains. Like will that buying power be there tomorrow for me to, I don't want to use the word dump on, but like for me to like sell my position. So being mindful of yeah, people like always chasing the next shiny object, knowing that like you need someone to sell to ultimately if you want to like lock in that gain, and that like yeah, just not getting greedy. Like you're already up 100x or 10x or 50x, whatever it is. Like why do you want another?
Yeah.
Like
Not why do you want it, but like be happy with that.
be happy,
Get out.
take it, and like there's like if you're patient enough, those opportunities will come again. That being said, like people who bought Bitcoin at $1 and sold it at 10 are like, oh, I got a 10x, like probably
Yeah.
pissed off today because at 20, 30K, I don't know what Bitcoin's at now. So there maybe are some things that you should hold on to your winners and maybe double down on them. In general, I don't think NFTs like during a hot like bubble market are not really that thing. So you want to kind of like
Yeah. But just all things like stocks. I mean, there's people who like bought and sold Tesla and missed like this huge
yeah,
swing.
like got a 2x on their money and they missed 100x. So
I've kind of been burnt both ways. Like, been burnt selling too early and also been burnt holding things way too long and being like, what was I doing? So it's really tough to know. But I like how you just have a mathematical approach to it, kind of unemotional, just like look for things early, take some wins, move on.
I would say there is some emotion too. Like I have had situations where like I'm like itching to sell. I'm like panicking that I'm almost like overly panicking that like the liquidity will just dry up tomorrow. And like I have this thing, it's up 10x, like it's gonna crash. Like hit just mash the sell button. So there is like emotion involved, but I think my emotion and my gut in those cases has been generally right. Sure, there's some things I sold that kept like running afterwards, but
Yeah.
it's fine. You walk away with like a 3 to 5x and just live to fight another day and find the next opportunity. So
Yeah. So you're always early on stuff. Speaking of finding the next opportunity, like what are things that you do to be really early and find the next opportunities, whether it's in crypto or stocks or startups?
yeah, I would say I'm going back to like the COVID thing with the S&P 500, being on Twitter a lot, being in Discords, being in like niche communities that like are almost like doing the work for me, like people that I trust that like are cutting edge and on the cusp of things, and like I can kind of just read their thoughts and read what they're posting, like absorb everything like a fire hose, and then kind of like double click into the things I find interesting and learn more about them. So it's like kind of going, it's a like an eye shaped approach, like basically, or T-shaped rather, like very broad at first. That's like the top of the T, and then like finding a thing that you like and then going deep on it. So having like, I guess your information diet's very important. Like, what are you like reading on Twitter? What are you reading on Discord? Like, who are you like having dinner with, having conversations with? That's like my sourcing of information. And then I'll like typically find something like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I want to learn more about that. And then dig into that, and kind of like just curiosity takes me down the rabbit hole in that thing, basically.
What are you going down the rabbit hole on these days? Because NFTs are a little dead. Like, what are the early communities forming right now?
Yeah, I think some of the AI stuff is really cool, obviously, but like everyone's doing the AI stuff, so I don't know how like how ahead of the curve I am there. I have been looking at the AI music stuff. I know I've tried to transform your voice a couple times. I'm still playing with that in my free time. I don't have a ton of free time. It's like NBA playoffs now, so I've been a little busy with work. But people are saying that like ChatGPT and AI is like basically a generational shift as big as like the microprocessor. So like there is a lot of energy around AI. I just think it's like it's not my niche, and I haven't had time to dedicate to like finding how to best how to best be early there, given just that everyone's like experimenting with it. So I would say that's, I have my eyes on AI, but there's probably some like subset of AI that's like really interesting that I haven't found out is like the next big thing, but I'd keep my eyes probably in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I think that stuff's so cool. Like, I think different from like the whole Web3 movement, it's like there's obviously everyone's attaching AI, but it's like it's going to change how existing companies are running, which is cool, right? It's like companies that aren't AI companies, but they're literally already just using the technology to like replace people. And like, so I think it's going to change the world like as much as the internet did.
I mean, I use it in my day to day for like work.
Yeah.
Like stuff that I'm like it's very tough when you get started on tasks. So sometimes I'm like staring at a blank page for like hours just because like that's how my brain works. It just doesn't want to do the thing. But now I've found myself just throwing like a prompt at ChatGPT of like, hey, like I need to do this thing, design this feature that, basically needs to do this ABC, send it to ChatGPT. It gives me like a starting point, and that gets the ball rolling a lot easier than just me like staring at the blank page for hours. Like I actually bootstrap a lot of like my documents with ChatGPT, and then like it's easier to say, oh, this is wrong, let me fix this, than to stare at a blank page. So I use it as a starting point. I use it for like some code stuff that I can't figure out, like just dump the code in there and like, hey, like tell me where I'm wrong, and it'll just tell me. So it's like having a million little micro assistants helping you out, which is pretty sick. Can it do like everything a human can? No, but it's like definitely helpful in certain spots.
And it's so early that it'll get there. It's just going to get better and better to like scary levels. Okay, you recently turned down $400,000 for an NFT that you found for free. So basically, you uncovered a lost X copy NFT, which is one of the most notable NFT artists. I think one of the original, or if not the original NFT artist. And they had an NFT they created in 2016 or something, maybe one of the first, locked in a contract. So tell that story.
All right. So a few things. It's 2018 that he created them.
Okay.
And it was, I turned down basically 340. It was 200 ETH, and ETH was like 1,700 at the time. And I didn't get them quite for free. I spent like 5 or 10K.
Okay, so I exaggerated a lot for the point of the podcast, but
directionally correct. So what happened was last year, almost exactly like a year ago to like mid-April, basically, I was doing my taxes, which is like the thing I hate doing the most ever. And I'm always looking for distractions when I'm doing my taxes. So I just like fired up Twitter. Again, there's like a common theme with a lot of the stuff starts with Twitter, but find a thread on, like, I'm just like scrolling through my feed. Someone posted a thread about Xcopy. And as you mentioned, he's like, the OG crypto artist, basically like the Picasso, or like, like the LeBron of NFTs.
Is he anonymous?
He's anonymous. Yeah.
Okay.
I think certain people know his identity, but I think he's more or less anonymous.
Okay.
But he's been there from the start, making art, like never really sold out, never did any cringe like PFP collections, like consistently produced awesome work, very highly respected, being crypto native. He's not like someone who like was an artist who just like doing crypto for the cash grab. So all around, like, very, very highly people are like highly sought after his pieces.
And
So,
his pieces sell for hundreds of thousands,
yeah,
if
his
not
like
millions,
one of
right?
ones on super rare sell for like I think over 1 million. I think he's got some of the highest NFT sales of all time.
Wow.
So his name's like established, NFTs, if your thesis is that they're not going away, like his name is established like the number one. So that's like just context on him. But what's interesting about Xcopy is he was an early Crypto Strikers user. So I remembered that name from back in the day because he had like shouted us out on Twitter. He had a couple thousand followers at the time. He's like, great work, guys. This project's really cool. He's British, I think, like, UK soccer team. He bought a few of them. And like, I just remembered that name from Crypto Strikers in 2018. So, anyways, fast forward back to last year, doing my taxes, see the name Xcopy come out. I hadn't heard it in a couple months. I'm like, oh, like, I wonder if he's still holding his Crypto Strikers. So, kind of just like go down a rabbit hole of like looking through his transaction history because, like, everything's public on the blockchain. You can see anything, like every single activity someone's done on the blockchain since the day they started their account. And basically, around the same time, like I found where he sold his cards. He bought them and then like sold them a few months later. But around that same time, I saw like some like pretty mysterious transactions where he minted some pieces of art and then like they never sold after that. I kind of like clicked into them and they just like got minted to a contract and then never transacted like after that point. So I'm like, that's kind of interesting. Like early 2018 Xcopy pieces that were created and like no one ever bought. Like what's going on there? So I did some digging. Turns out he had minted them for this old NFT marketplace called Fanbits, which I remembered from back in the day. Again, being early, I kind of like knew those guys very briefly. They were an OpenSea competitor. They went under kind of like right before the NFT boom in 2020, 2021. So like speaking of timing again, they were a little too early. But they had built a platform where artists can kind of create pieces and sell them to the public. So started, digging through their Discord. And basically what happened is he listed the pieces for sale at like a really cheap price, a couple $100s a piece in 2018. The site went down, which is like the user interface where you can actually go and like buy the pieces. So they were still living in the smart contract, but there was no like UI or interface for the average person to go buy them. And no one had done this digging to see that like, yeah, these pieces were created and never bought. And like, we're still there listed at the price he initially put them on for, again, a couple $100 in 2018. So I'm like, at this point, I'm like, all right, I'm not doing my taxes now. Like I'll like, file an extension, deal with this later. And I had to write some code kind of to recover them because there was no UI. I had to manually kind of extract the pieces from that contract. And turns out there was two different like artworks, 50 units of each that were all for sale for like a couple $100. So basically, sent the money to the smart contract, got the pieces in return. And I messaged Xcopy. I'm like, hey, like, we had a connection on Discord. So that person made the intro, message him. I'm like, hey, like I have these like 100 pieces. Like, what's the deal? He's like, oh, like, I hated that site. It never really worked well. They're kind of like glitched. If it was up to me, I would have like let them like sit there forever and burn. But like, since you found them and you reached out to me, let's burn 48 of each edition. So like, there's two times 50. So burn 48 of each and keep one each for you and me, just like as like a souvenir, as a keepsake, basically. So did all the burning for him. And I ended up with, two pieces, 2 of 2s. I have one, Xcopy has one. They're sitting there in my account. I've done like a couple Twitter threads about them. Just like, one, I think it's a cool story of like finding lost artwork. It's almost the modern day equivalent of finding like a sunken pirate ship,
Yeah.
And so I did a few Twitter threads, it's gotten some attention. And then randomly in February, someone kind of messaged me and was like, hey, like, I want them. Like, what can I do to get them? He's like, look at your OpenSea. I made offers. And I go like pull up OpenSea and he offered 100 ETH for each one. So for each of the two pieces. Again, at the time, ETH was like 1,700. So that's like 340K total. And I said no. I can get into why I said no, but I think it's just a funny,
I think that they should be worth millions. Like the whole point of art and NFTs is the story behind it, and like that story, the way you found them, reached out to him, burnt all the rest, made them one of two. The artist has one, you have one. Like that adds so much value, so much more value than if it would have just been like another Xcopy release that's like one of two or whatever.
For sure. And I think I haven't done the work to really tell that story. Like, this is one of the first times I'm actually saying it like in public. I think there's like a lot more work to do to like get the word out there. There's probably like, 10 to 20 credible collectors who would actually be interested in a piece of like that caliber. I don't think any of them, I think like two of them know about it basically. So like, you know, crafting that narrative of like, hey, these are like really, really important pieces. Like they're around the same time of being minted as like some of his pieces have sold for like millions. And like, there's like that story, as you said, of having found them and only the artist has one, blah, blah, blah. It's like, there's like a really cool narrative there. So I think getting that narrative out to the world is like part of what I want to do in the next few months. Also, like that was the first offer, I think, in principle, just like never accept the first offer on anything. Like you kind of want, in a dream world, you want like a bidding war. You want multiple people to be like really, really competing. I think sometimes ego comes into play, and like, you know, it's people want like the thing. So like there may be a bit of a rise in price if there's like a bidding war and there's two interested parties. Also, there's like a tax reason. You know, this was February. It wasn't quite my 1 year window for long-term capital gains tax. So like, you know, just waiting an extra month or two, I get an extra, you know, 20-30% savings on taxes. So there's like a lot of reasons. Sure, it was a good offer. It was on the low end of my range, but given the first offer, tax reasons, haven't done anything to like drive up interest in it, it was like a pretty easy no, to be honest. And I kind of didn't really think about it much afterwards. But when I tell people like I turned down 340K, it's like, yeah, that's like a lot of money. But
yeah. But I think you made a point of like, these aren't like some hot NFT that just was created and like everyone's buying. It's like literally like the Mona Lisa of NFTs. Like it's just been around for 5 years. The people who are buying this are not like kids coming in and trying to make quick flips. That's like real collectors with like serious money. And I think people don't realize how much money some of these crypto native people have. Like if you bought like ETH when it came out and people had a few $1,000s, like there's people with like hundreds of millions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
In
the
liquid
crazy whales. And they're, you know, these are people whose like pride and joy is their NFT collection and they're X copy collectors. And like the fact that this guy just YOLO offered 100 ETH per piece, like with no context, no like, you know, didn't even reach out to me beforehand, basically saw like a Twitter thread and was like, yeah, I got to have that. And just like, you know, sent over, like, this is like a legitimate offer. There was a button there where I could just click accept. It's not like he told me over text, I'll give you 100. Like the offer was there. The fact that someone's like willing to do that without much additional information just goes to show you that like there is a ton of money flowing around and like framed properly and for the right buyer. I think that's like, that was kind of the floor of what is a reasonable price. I think there's like a lot more upside that I can get just by doing some, you know, some narrative kind of crafting around it. So
yeah, that's cool. I'm sure. Hopefully after this, one of these clips goes viral, you get like a $10 million offer or something.
I mean, let's go. Let's see the reach of the podcast.
maybe we have some X copy collectors listening.
Yeah.
Okay. So your startup now is Hot Streak Fantasy. You guys are revolutionizing sports betting. You're doing it different than every other sports book. I'm an investor. Just got to say that, I think.
Yeah,
but
I think you have to make a disclosure.
You got to like disclose that. I'm an investor. I think you guys have built something really cool and unique. Can you describe like how Hot Streak is revolutionizing sports betting?
Yeah, you actually might be one of the first checks, I think. I think you may
because my room was like 4 feet away.
Yeah, just like by sheer proximity.
Oh yeah, I'll invest.
I think you got one of the first checks. No, it's funny because like we did that kind of initial seed round and like obviously like a lot of people we know invested, but I think you may have been like the first check we received. So
nice.
If ever things go well for us, you know, you'll have that honor of being at the very least like a really early check, at the most like the literal first check in the company. So yeah, we're a daily fantasy sports operator. So sports gaming will kind of like comprise of like sports betting and real money fantasy sports. It's kind of like a lot of like fields under sports gaming, but we're building tech for all the sports gaming. So right now we're in the DFS daily fantasy sports space. The tech is also applicable to like sports betting and sports books. But the main thing we're working on is fully automated odds origination, lines making, kind of in-game, like micro, like the hot word now is micro betting. So, you know, what we do is like the next 3 minutes of gameplay, will LeBron James hit a 3-pointer, like yes or no, and kind of have odds on it, like going back to our conversation about odds before, like we will give you the appropriate odds on either side based on like the likelihood of that event happening. And that's taking into account who's on the court with LeBron right now, what the score of the game is, what the time of the game is LeBron likely to get substituted off the court in the next 3 minutes? All these factors kind of just get like plugged into an AI, like deep learning model, and it just spits out like a number. Like LeBron James is 25% to hit a 3 in the next 3 minutes. And it'll give you the appropriate odds, and you can kind of pick you have to pick two players from two different teams. You can pick like LeBron to score a three, and then like Steph Curry to get an assist in the next 3 minutes. Hit like submit, $10 to win 100, and you like sit down and like watch the game on your TV, watch it unfold. If you hit, like you get paid out right away. If you lose, like, okay, let me get another one in. So kind of that instant gratification, just short attention span, but like really, really fun and engaging way to watch the game.
What's the biggest parlay someone's hit or the biggest cash out someone's hit on Hot Streak?
Yeah, I mean, so our max entry size is $200.
Okay.
So the max you can put down on an entry is 200, and our max payout's 32x. And people have hit the 200 for 32, so that's $6,400.
Nice.
Those are cool, and like we'd like to see those. It's like we'll showcase those on Twitter and be like, oh, like big win of the night, whatever. So we're looking to raise those limits soon, but for now it's 200 times 32.
I think within sports betting, a lot of it like turns me off kind of, but I like how you guys do it because it really is more of a game where it's like not huge amounts and like it's more like taking shots that during the game that you're like engaging with the game you're watching for small amounts, but you can have big wins. But yeah, hopefully, you know what I mean? It stays fun.
It's actually like a really interesting science because you can't like burn your users out too quickly because like if you're just like profit margins are actually not good in sports betting or sports gaming in general. It's not like you don't want to have 100% margins because that means like every time someone places a bet, they get like $0 back, right?
Right.
So there's a concept of like return to player, which is, how much is the person winning on average for each like $100 they play or each dollar they play. So there's kind of like a sweet spot where you want like a healthy margin so you can pay for your operations and pay for your be a profitable company, but also where the game is fun and like it's entertainment. Like as long as someone's playing within their limits, it's more so adding entertainment value to the game they're watching, and like they get some money back, they lose some, but it kind of like hovers over that initial amount and maybe like a slight dip, like a slight decline, and like that's like the house edge, but it's still like fun and engaging and within responsible kind of gaming framework. So that's the dream for us.
So basically, you guys and all sportsbook and all gambling and casino basically work on. There's that percentage between what the actual odds are and what odds the customer's getting or the better, right?
Correct. Yeah. So assume a coin flip. Say you were able to bet like you go to FanDuel or DraftKings and you're like at the Super Bowl, you can bet heads or tails in the coin flip, right? If this was a perfectly fair game, you would bet 10 to win 10 on either side. And like over time, over like hundreds of millions of coin flips, you just break even. Cause like whenever you win, you're getting like your same wager back. And like whenever you lose, like you're losing $10. So, but if like that coin flip paid like 19 or like gave you back 19 when you won instead of 20, and you lost 10 when you lost, there's like this slight house edge where like they're taking essentially a small tax from the winners, and over time that's how they, that's how a sports book or kind of a sports betting company makes their money, is with that like not giving the full payout on the winning side.
And same for like a basketball game. If you look at odds, it's like minus 110, minus 110, meaning to win 100, you need to risk 110.
Exactly.
And so over and over, the house is keeping $10 on every.
Yeah. If you're like a perfectly average, better and you're like getting 50-50, like you're just like right half the time, wrong half the time, like you'll lose that kind of like $10, that 110 to win 100.
Yeah.
So you have to be like a 53-ish%. I forget if it's 50, somewhere in that range. You have to be slightly better than average to like beat the books in the long run.
Yeah.
And like, unless you're really sophisticated, you're not beating that. So
yeah. So flipping to a sports betting consumer user, how are people making money in sports betting? Because obviously there's people like betting and some win. I don't really think like that's sustainable, but I've seen really interesting ways where people, because a lot of the sports books are now trying to drive user growth and all that, they're like actually creating opportunities for people to make money.
Yeah. So there is like people beating the books in like very inefficient markets, like some niche like European ping pong league where like they have either like the games are being thrown or like they just have more information than the books. The issue there is that like one, you're going to spend a lot of time building your models to beat the books, and like they'll find out you're winning and just cut your limits to 0. It's like they can just ban you. So it's like it's kind of
same way you get thrown out of a casino for counting cards.
Exactly.
Like you're beating them, but then they can just tell you to leave.
Exactly. So if you're just beating them straight up, like it's a game of cat and mouse, they're going to find you, limit your account, like whatever. You got the intellectual kind of satisfaction of outsmarting them, but they can just pull the rug from underneath you. The way people are actually making a lot of money now in the US, a bit less now, but more so when sports betting started getting legalized. So just some context, there was a federal ban on sports betting that got lifted in 2018. That was a thing called PASPA. So that bill got lifted, and then states were free to kind of pass their own bills to legalize sports betting. So like New Jersey went first. I think Colorado is like one of the first ones, kind of like marijuana, where each state can pass their own bill. But basically, it's like a land grab for the U.S. right now. It's like the richest economy in the world, ton of money flowing around. Americans love sports, so like the DraftKings, the FanDuels, the Caesars, the MGMs. Every time a state goes live, they just want to grab as much market share as possible, and they're just going to like have these crazy promos, like $3,000 risk free in bets, or like sign up now, like deposit match up to $1,000, like just these promos and these like boosts and all these things that are just meant to attract users and build brand loyalty to the sportsbook, with the idea that once they can like cut the spend down, the users develop like an affinity to that sportsbook and they'll stick around forever. And like the lifetime value of the customer will be like more than the bonuses they gave you in the free money. But if you're just like strictly mercenary and you want to make like quick 20K, 30K or something, you can like go to each state, create accounts there, get all the bonuses. Like, I mean, I can give some like a bit dark magic secrets, but like, say there's like a Warriors Lakers game today, right? And like normally as a stipulation of the bonus, you have to play through the bet amounts. You can't just like deposit money and like withdraw the money right away. You got to play through it like one time or two times. Well, all these different terms for bonuses, but you can put like, your entire bonus bet on one sportsbook on the Warriors, the rest of the amount, or on another sportsbook, put the entire amount on the Lakers, and like you're going to win on one of them, obviously. Like either the Warriors or the Lakers are going to win. And if the house edge on those, like those are pretty like low edge markets, is like less than like the bonus amount, like you can kind of like churn through your bonus playthrough by just like smartly placing bets and like walk away with the money. Like, and the money will be withdrawable at some point once you've played it enough, and you take the money and you can like, as long as you don't gamble it all on sports, you can make a quick, probably, I don't know, 15, 20, 30K on bonuses.
It's kind of it's one way.
Yeah. And a lot of these things, a lot of these operators require you to actually be present in the state. So you have to like actually go to like, I don't know, go to Arizona, open an account.
And you can't get around that either with like VPNs and stuff.
No. They require like GPS. And like, I know friends, I'm not going to name names, but they have like a laptop like sitting in Arizona and they kind of like remote into the laptop.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there's some crazy shit happening.
What about selling picks? I see a lot of that these days. People are like, buy my picks, like screenshots of their parlays hitting. I assume it's like they take the one thing that hits, they post it, they sell you their pick, they make money off that. They're not actually making money off the bets average. Are there people actually, is that a scam, or are people actually making money off picks?
I'll say that, like, going back to what I said earlier, that if you're actually winning, the books will just limit you. Like, if you see someone placing like $100,000 bets like consistently, it's because like they're not winning. Like they're just like, the sports books probably love that customer because they're actually losing money. Yeah. As you said, they're showing the winning tickets, not showing the losing ones. Anybody who's actually like a really, really good sports bettor and beating the books has like, are using like fake names to place bets, are like trying to circumvent the limiting and the banning that happens when you're a winning player. So they're not like on Twitter saying like, look at me, I'm like winning. So like there's almost like a negative selection bias where the people who are actually sharing those picks and being like, oh my God, I just made, 300K today on like sports betting, and they're posting these like massive tickets. Those are like definitely losing bettors because like otherwise they couldn't get that money down. Like the sports books would just ban them. So it's kind of like, be careful what you see, because
it's like the people in the casinos in Vegas who are like, I got a free hotel, free meal, like upgrades, everything. Like, yeah, they like you because you lose money.
Exactly. The casinos probably love those people because like probably for two reasons. One, like they themselves are losing better. And two, also they have like these huge Twitter audiences that they're convincing that they can go and beat the books. And like, they're all fish too. Like those people are not going to make any money. They're driving traffic to the Vegas casinos and the sports books. And like they themselves are kind of bleeding, 100K bets here and there, but it's probably like the subscriber money from their Patreon is going to place these bets, which is just like a marketing expense to get more people on the Patreon or the Discord. It's like, they're not making money.
Do you know anyone who's actually beating sports books, and what are they doing?
They have a lot of their work is done around like creating accounts under people's names, making sure like mixing good bets with bad bets to not raise flags. Having like rows of phones on a table that someone is constantly tapping to keep the screen alive. So like, because apparently sometimes if you get logged out and you log back in, like the sportsbook like detects, there's some like measure of like activity, and like if they ban you, some of the books, I think it has to be like a log out and a log in to take effect. Like there's like all these things. It's just basically most of their work is spent finding ways to get the money down because they have an edge. They're actually like beating the books. They know they have a mathematical edge over them.
What's the edge? Like, how do they find those edges?
Probably just a lot of research, a lot of, sometimes the books will move a line because the public is like very heavy on one side, but like that's not the true line. If you have a good model, you know that the true price is like, take for example, the Dallas Cowboys, like they're America's team. There's always a bit more money on the Cowboys. The books can probably like juice the line a bit to one side, knowing that the public has a bias towards the Cowboys. If you're like a really sharp sports bettor, you might know that there's like a bit of edge going like the counter to the public, but you just can't get enough money down for it to be worth it. So now it's like a game of I want to put down $1 million in this game. Like, how do I do it? You might have to travel to different states. You might have to go to like in-person casinos, send like your wife or your girlfriend to actually place a bet with cash in one place. So you'll get like action down, but it won't be like as simple as opening up FanDuel because they'll probably have banned your account already.
So you could actually like betting, let's say, against the Knicks and the Cowboys and the Lakers, because these are like people have so like emotional connections to these teams more than not. Probably, so the line is never like correct. You're saying like you could just bet against those teams all the time and eventually win.
Those markets, I think that was like a bit of just a simplified example. Yeah. Those markets are pretty efficient. Like who's going to win the game, like who's going to win the Super Bowl is probably like the most efficient market. It has the most amount of money flowing through it.
Right.
And when money flows in, that's how you kind of like hammer like odds and lines into place because the book is kind of taking in the information of like, oh, like this person just bet $1 million. They're sharp. Like, or like they're, this seems like we need to kind of hedge our exposure. So you probably have a bit more edge in less efficient markets like player props, alternate lines. So like there's probably spots there where the book just has such a huge surface area to cover. It's like FanDuel has to offer like thousands of bets per night because like they've like built this incredible kind of experience where you can bet on anything you want during the game. People come to expect that like they can go and bet on like will LeBron James and Steph Curry combine for over under 58.5 points. So you can do like derivative bets and like you can tease the line one side. So there's just this huge offering. The book has to offer all of it, but you can get by on picking up on like 3 or 4 lines that are mispriced. Like they're gonna make mistakes somewhere. So if you're patient enough and you're just like a small like bettor, you can find those spots where they're wrong if you have models and pick them off. But if you win too much, they'll limit you. So it's like people do win, but then it becomes that game of cat and mouse I mentioned, where it's like, how do I actually get the money down? So
interesting. Okay, I want to finish off with a couple like personal money questions. All right, what's your favorite thing to spend money on?
Man, favorite thing to spend money on. Let me just take a sip of water while I think about the answer. Man, lately it's been furniture. Lately I've been getting into just like, I mean, we've lived in that house together in when did we move in? October 2019.
Yeah.
So like I've been in that same spot for like 4.5-ish years now. And like you remember how it was when you lived there at first, it was like massive 80-inch flat screen TV on the wall and then like an air mattress on the ground, kind of like a crack den, and like really nice house, but just like very bare bones.
Yeah.
And over time, I think like as I've added more and more furniture and kind of turning it into like a home, it does feel really nice when you come home to something and it's like, wow, like I like my couch, like I like my rug, I like my like TV stand and stuff.
It's a good investment.
Yeah. And it's like stuff, if you're buying the right stuff, it kind of keeps its value. If you're buying kind of like vintage and I don't know, I've been nerding out on furniture. So I would say that's like my newfound, if I'm going to spend money, it's going to be like on stuff that makes my home feel more like a home. So.
Yeah. What do you think the weirdest thing you do, what your weirdest money habit is, or the hottest take, or the hottest,
Yeah. I mean, probably like, have you had the rent versus buy debate on this?
A couple times.
Okay. I mean, some people might say like just renting is like a weird thing. And given the amount I pay for rent relative to like what a mortgage costs where they're at, like, mortgage in LA is kind of crazy. But they just look at the absolute numbers of like, oh, like you spend X on rent. And like in Montreal, for example, where we're both from, like you can get like this, you can get a house with this mortgage and like this square footage, blah, blah, blah. And like you own it, you're not paying someone's mortgage. And like, and I like just staunchly disagree with like everything they say. Like I have my own reasons, but I think that like some people think it's like a pretty spicy take. Like I see myself renting almost forever.
That's a good one. I like that. I like the debate. And I agree. I think it's like, a personal thing. I don't think one or the other is necessarily better. There's reasons for both. But I hate the people who are like, buying's better because if you're paying rent, you're just throwing the money away. Like, that's just the stupidest thing. Like, sometimes it makes more sense financially to buy. Sometimes it makes more sense financially to rent. And sometimes it doesn't matter, and you just do what's more convenient or what you like, you know? Like, I know people who buy houses and they're like, yeah, it doesn't make sense financially, but I just want to know that no one can kick me out of here, and I want to change the door and the paint color, and like, cool. You know what I mean? Like, so
I have no judgment against people who buy homes. I'm like, oh, you're making the wrong financial decision.
Yeah.
It's just like, I know what gives me max flexibility. I know what I like. And like, this is like really like relevant and like really perfect for my situation. But other people are just like, they're a bit more dogmatic and like saying like, oh, you should be buying. I'm like, you know nothing about my situation. Why are you like, peanut galleries chiming in? So
I like it. Good answer. I'm gonna start asking everybody that at the end. What's your weirdest take on money?
I'm trying. I might have some weirder ones, but I think that's like
that's a good one.
Who you ask is probably like a pretty weird.
Doesn't have to be crazy. Just
right.
All right. Let's wrap. That's good.
That's it.
Thanks for coming on. Yeah.